Hello, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. And we continue to be in a dynamic and rapidly changing labor market. The latest change that we reported yesterday was a slowdown in job growth. After adding nearly 18,000 jobs in July and almost 9,000 in August, non-farm payrolls lost 200 jobs in September. As we've seen since the beginning of the pandemic recession and throughout the recovery, employment trends vary quite a bit across different areas of the economy. Some sectors are thriving. The professional and technical services industry, those are employers that are providing architectural, engineering, computer systems, design, and other services. They had 6,000 more jobs in September than they did before the recession started. Transportation, warehousing, and utilities is another example. Employment surged in the sector throughout 2020 and into 2021. And as of September, transportation, warehousing, and utilities had 3,900 more jobs than it did before the recession. And this is a sector that's likely to continue growing in the coming weeks. Transportation, warehousing, and utilities is an increasingly seasonal sector, especially as we're seeing package deliveries in particular get to their peak volume in December. Other areas of Oregon's economy have been struggling. About half of local government jobs are in public K-12 schools and higher education. And after shedding jobs through parts of 2020, we've seen recent ramp-ups in local government hiring. Still, local government fell 3,700 jobs short of what we'd expect to see added in terms of jobs in September. And while it's much smaller, private education has also lagged in recovery. It's only added back about 1 out of 5 jobs that were lost in the spring of 2020. And looking at Oregon's hotels, restaurants, bars, and entertainment places, the leisure and hospitality sector, it added 2,200 jobs in September, and that was one of the biggest gains that we saw over the month. And leisure and hospitality has added 31,500 jobs so far in 2021. So in the last 9 months, they added as many jobs as they did in the 64 months leading up to the pandemic recession. So that's a lot of hiring. And even with all of that hiring, leisure and hospitality still is about 42,000 jobs below its pre-recession employment level. And it makes up a little more than half of the overall gap to a full jobs recovery in Oregon. Now, other areas of Oregon's economy seem a little bit off trend for what we would expect. Private healthcare and social assistance has historically been a big sector with consistent job growth, regardless of economic conditions, since at least 1990. In September, the sector lost 300 jobs, so it was pretty close to the level of hiring we'd expect to see this time of year. Over the past year, though, private healthcare and social assistance has added 3,000 jobs, or 1.1%. And that's the slowest growth rate of any major sector in the state over the past year. Now, if we look below the surface, again, it's kind of like with the economy overall, we see that different areas of healthcare and social assistance are seeing very different trends. So the doctors' offices, dentists, other specialists, that portion of healthcare has grown by a little more than 2,000 jobs over the past year. And with a recent uptick, private social assistance, so that's things like childcare and private individual and family services, that's up by about 4,000 over the past year. Yet, hospitals lost 400 jobs over the past year, and at the same time, nursing and residential care facilities lost 3,000 jobs. And those are similar trends to what we're seeing for the US and those parts of healthcare as well. Oregon's unemployment rate dropped to 4.7% in September from a revised rate of 5% in August. This was another significant decline in the unemployment rate. And while that improvement is mostly due to workers moving into jobs, we've also seen the labor force drop slightly, and that happened in both the US and in Oregon in September. We also saw the number of unemployed people in Oregon who had voluntarily left jobs more than double over the past year to about 11,000 in September. And these are the people who show up just as unemployed in the data, meaning that they didn't have another job lined up when they left theirs. More broadly, we're seeing that in other data sources, record numbers of workers have been quitting their jobs nationwide. And when quits are on the rise, that can contribute to a situation where even when employers are hiring, on net, they might be breaking even or losing jobs in some cases. And it's of note that the two sectors where the highest share of job separations nationwide, now separations is leaving for any reason, being quit or quitting, being laid off or getting fired. The two sectors where the highest share of job separations was due to quits at the end of August was in healthcare and in jobs at restaurants, hotels, and bars. Today, the Employment Department also released the latest job vacancy survey results for summer 2021. Oregon's private employers had 107,000 job vacancies between July and September. That's another record level of job openings, and hiring and the need for workers remains widespread throughout the economy. Private healthcare and social assistance had 21,000 job vacancies. Leisure and hospitality had 17,000 job vacancies. And 4 other sectors reported record numbers of job vacancies in the summer. That included retail trade, manufacturing, professional and technical services, and financial activities. Employers reported that 4 out of 5 jobs were difficult to fill. And that was also a record level of difficulty filling job openings. Businesses cited too few or no applicants as their biggest hiring challenge in the summer. That was the primary hiring challenge for about half of all hard to fill job openings. And it reflects us being in a situation where the unemployment rate by historical standards is getting really low. And we also have this record number of job openings. There just aren't enough available workers to fill this record level of job vacancies. And for another 15% of hard to fill job openings, businesses told us that the wage that they offered was too low. Now, overall, we saw that the average starting wage, which was $19.99 per hour in the summer, it rose by about 4% compared to a year before. Yet, it was about a 1% decrease once you adjust for inflation. I want to keep focus on workers and households too. There are still barriers some workers are facing as COVID-19 continues. Between September 15th and September 27th, the Census Bureau estimates that there were 64,000 adults in Oregon whose primary reason for not working was because they had COVID-19 or were caring for somebody who had COVID-19. And during the same period, 44,000 Oregonians said their main reason for not working was because they were concerned that they would either get or spread COVID-19. We're still in a time of many rapid changes, all of which are impacting different parts of the economy and people's lives in different ways. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Acting Director David Gerstenfeld for more updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. When I first became acting director at the Employment Department last year, I made a commitment to transparency, and today I'd like to share some updates on the Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance, or PFMLI program. This program will be critical to the lives of working Oregonians, and this was made even more apparent during the pandemic as so many people had to miss work due to COVID-19. As we've shared previously, the pace of progress in the implementation of Oregon's new Paid Family and Medical Leave Insurance program has been increasing. Rulemaking is actively underway, as is the integration of the program into our modernization project, and we're actively developing the technology to provide these benefits and collect contributions to Oregonians. We remain on track for the statutory implementation dates, but we have had some real challenges. We've been transparent since the beginning that the timelines for such a major program were aggressive even before the pandemic. And building a team and a whole new program is not easy when resources are pulled away to respond to the urgent demands of the pandemic. And unfortunately, we are losing several employees from key positions, including our acting director, who in August announced his planned departure at the end of this month. While people leave for various reasons, having this many key people leave makes it clear that we need to make some changes, and we are making changes. Some employees have raised concerns about the culture not living up to the high expectations that we have and that the public does have and should have for us. in building an inclusive, equitable program to serve the public, and also in reflecting that equity and inclusion within the PFMLI team itself. We have an outside attorney looking into a complaint we received about discriminatory behavior and a lack of accountability. While I can't talk about an ongoing investigation, I want to be very clear that these concerns are something I take extremely seriously. Having an objective external investigation is important to us, and we're not going to wait on the outcome of that investigation to take action towards culture change within the program. We must be sure that paid family and medical leave insurance as a program fosters an inclusive work environment and is accessible to all the people of Oregon in ways that many public programs simply have not been in the past. The Employment Department is committed to building a program that, both inside and out, challenges the status quo and ensures we are not repeating practices that harm or disenfranchise underserved populations. We're working aggressively to provide the support, tools, and accountability that the PFMLI program and its employees need and deserve to be successful. First, I've already met with the PFMLI team to reiterate my expectations that we foster an inclusive and supportive workplace for all employees. Second, we're in the final stages of recruiting for a permanent PFMLI director, someone who can provide stable, consistent leadership for the team and lead the necessary shifts in culture for the program. The new director will fill the vacant leadership positions with people who are dedicated to building an inclusive, equitable program. And third, we're going to bring in outside equity and inclusion experts to look at both the program and at our internal practices that impact the people we serve, as well as our own employees. We hope to have completed filling these leadership vacancies and bringing in these outside experts within 3 months, and we'll keep you apprised of these efforts as they continue. Turning to our important work to help people find jobs, our WorkSource Oregon centers continue focusing on helping people find jobs and helping employers find talented workers. Between now and the end of the month, we're promoting 8 job fairs across the state. Highlights of these include a LinkedIn for Oregon job seekers workshop from 9 to 10 a.m. this Thursday, where job seekers can learn directly from LinkedIn the best tips and tricks to optimize their profile and their job search efforts. A diversity employment career fair in Portland from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. this Friday, October 22nd. The Hillsborough Manufacturing Month Walk and Talk at the Hillsborough Brookwood Library from 10 a.m. to noon on Wednesday, October 27th. And the Mount Hood Meadows and Cooper Spur Mountain Resort Job Fair from 1 to 5 p.m. on Saturday, October 30th. These events and more are included on our website at worksourceoregon.org. A reminder that to ensure the safety of our employees and visitors and to prevent further spread of COVID-19, masks must be worn by all employees and customers. Turning to unemployment insurance benefits, we continue our employer and worker-focused listening sessions on the available for work requirements for people seeking unemployment insurance benefits. These listening sessions are being conducted outside of the permanent rulemaking process. Our goal is to provide multiple opportunities to receive feedback from workers, the public, businesses, nonprofits, and others on the temporary changes. The temporary rule is already in place, but we want this feedback before we make any possible permanent changes to the rule in the future. Under this temporary rule, people filing for benefits must be available for suitable work for at least 40 hours per week, or a minimum of 1 shift per day if the work they do is shift-based. Our new temporary rule recognizes that if someone has barriers preventing them from returning to their work, they may still be eligible to receive benefits if they're willing to seek an alternate type of work for which they're available at least 1 shift per day or 40 hours per week. We've been notifying claimants to make sure people know about this rule change, and they can also visit our online temporary eligibility rule FAQs for more information. We have 5 listening sessions remaining, and simultaneous interpretation will be available in Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and Cantonese. Listening session dates and times are posted on the webinar page of our website. And after today's media briefing, I encourage you to take a look at our updated dashboard located on our website at unemployment.oregon.gov on the media webpage. This dashboard has been a valuable tool throughout the pandemic, and it's an important part of our efforts to be transparent as an agency. With the end of the federal pandemic benefits, we thought it was time to update this dashboard to make sure that we're providing you with the information that is most valuable to people now. Instead of a running total since March 2020, you will see weekly claims data, including the number of new claims filed, as well as the amount of benefits claimed the week before. In addition, we have expanded the dashboard to include monthly data from our WorkSource Oregon partners. This data reflects our work to help people find jobs, such as how many job seekers and employers we assisted, and also the number of jobs that are posted. And of course, you'll still find our current statistics for call response times, which for last week was answering nearly 95% of calls in 15 minutes or less, and contact us inquiries, where 97% of those were resolved within 7 days. And also, when there are new issues for us to highlight, we'll be adding new metrics to that dashboard. We'd welcome any feedback that you have on the new dashboard. And if you have that, please share it with us at oed_communications@employ.oregon.gov. And in closing, we're very excited and hopeful about the continued decline in unemployment rates and in the big interest that employers and job seekers have in our job fairs. We'll continue working hard to help people find jobs or training and helping employers find the talented workers that they need. We continue to deal with many changes throughout the economy and the agency, and we're committed to working with those we serve to best support Oregonians. I'm very thankful we have such dedicated employees. For the last 19 months, they have gone above and beyond to meet the needs of Oregonians, and they continue being dedicated to helping people in need. And with that, I think we're ready to try to answer questions that people may have.
Yes, we're going to open up the lines to members of the media to ask questions. We will call on you in the order that you RSVP'd. Please make sure to state to whom, either David or Gail, you're directing your question. And as a reminder, if you are joining us by phone, and be sure to hit *6 to unmute yourself. And if you don't get your question answered today, or if you thought of something that you want to ask us later, reach out to us at oed_communications@employ.oregon.gov. Up first is Peter Wong with Pamplin Media.
Hi, good afternoon. I have one question for each of you. I'll start with David first. I guess your guess is as good as mine as to where there will be a federal paid medical leave program included in the budget resolution that is still being debated. Obviously, if it doesn't get in, the state will proceed with its program. What happens if the Congress does include such a component? How is that going to complicate, if it does complicate your work, or whether Oregon's program, since it's at least further ahead than any federal effort, would that take precedence? I think we've discussed this before, but I'd like to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, it's a good question, and we are really on a good track implementing that program. So that work is continuing, and we've communicated with the federal delegation looking at some of the potential federal paid family and medical leave insurance programs. We're glad to see some national attention to this important support program. Frankly, the one that has been passed in Oregon looks like it would probably be more beneficial and more supportive of Oregon workers and businesses than the national model, although it's early in legislative proposals, so things can change a lot. But based on what we've seen so far, Oregon would continue with its program in either event. And the federal programs, the most recent proposals that we've seen, allow states that already have programs that are operating or underway to continue to do so. And it would provide some federal funding for the benefits and operation of those programs. So I'm sure there would probably need to be some adjustments and some alignments of the program. But when we've looked, some of the core features of the federal program are already built into Oregon's. And in many areas, Oregon is already more expansive in terms of the way that it supports both covering leave and providing benefits, and also helping businesses by providing grants to small businesses. So we'll monitor closely, but at this point, we are working full speed and continuing to implement this program for Oregon businesses and workers.
Okay, thank you. Gail, my question for you is, I know no two recoveries look exactly alike, economic recoveries. Can we say that September's numbers are a blip on the overall trend, or is that too early to tell? And I noticed Josh Lehner posted a blog entry today that he is still an optimist about explaining that labor income is up even though the labor force may be down, and he speculates there are reasons why that labor force number might increase in the next few months. So I think your overall projections are that there will be a full recovery sometime next year in the number of jobs. So
yes, the Office of Economic Analysis does expect that we'll get back to that February 2020 jobs level in the summer of 2022. You're correct that no two recoveries look alike, and even with the loss of the 200 jobs in September, we're still in a dramatically faster recovery than we were coming out of the Great Recession. We have added back nearly 3 out of 4 jobs that were lost in the spring of 2020. And it took us years to recover from the Great Recession. We didn't actually get, the downturn started at the end of 2007, and we didn't get back to our pre-recession jobs level until the mid-2010s. So it is happening much more rapidly. In terms of what will happen next, I think that we have seen many iterations of the same unpredictability happening across the pandemic recession and now the recovery, where when we see another wave of COVID come through, that has a different impact to workers and to businesses. I mentioned the people who said they had COVID in the second half of September, and that's the primary reason that they weren't working. That's a really direct impact on those people's lives and on the ability for employers to have the workforce that they need. So I think in terms of September, we're hopeful that we're going to see recovery kick back up again. But I think a lot of it just really depends on the many different things that are happening around COVID itself. And one last point on incomes. Yes, I have spoken with the Office of Economic Analysis, and we've talked about incomes overall, that there's still about 10% above where they were before the recession. And we've seen data from the Indeed Hiring Lab and the stuff that OEA is publishing as well, talking about how that financial cushion is really good for our outlook and our ability to grow. But it also, in a household sense, is a cushion where, take those 44,000 workers who said they were scared of getting COVID or giving it to someone else. If you've got a little bit of a financial cushion, that gives you maybe a little bit of room to wait until you don't feel like that's going to happen to you before you, rush into the first available job. So in the longer term, I do agree that we should see some increase in labor supply. And I do think that we'll continue to see jobs recovery and ultimately expansion. But the timing of that does seem a little bit unpredictable. And it has been, I think, ever since the pandemic recession started and now in the recovery.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Up next, we have Mike Rogoway with the Oregonian.
Hey, I got a couple questions for David. David, can you tell us more about the nature of the concerns that employees raised? How many employees were raising concerns about the culture, and what kinds of discrimination were taking place? Was allegedly taking place?
So I really can't say much about the ongoing investigation. I can say that there was a single formal complaint that was filed, and that we take it very seriously, and we want to make sure that if anybody else has concerns that we know about them and that we really get to the bottom of it. Because it is an ongoing investigation, I really can't say much more than that.
Okay, can you say if we're talking racial or gender or disability discrimination or anything like that?
I really don't feel comfortable doing that, Mike. Again, it's really important to us that the investigation be objective and impartial. We take this really seriously, which is why we're doing that, to make sure that we get an objective view of what the concerns were and what else, if anything, we might need to do. And we'll share when we are able to. I will state that, as I mentioned, we've already taken a number of steps and have been clear, restating expectations with the team and its expectations that apply throughout the agency, that equity and inclusion is not optional at our agency. It's core to what we do. We want to be building that future agency and really be at the cutting edge of serving everyone and making services accessible to everyone. So that's really important to this program. And we will share more information. We're also committed to that transparency, but we're already reiterating, already have, and taking those steps to make sure that this program is built to serve everyone. And that's externally and internally also.
Okay, thanks. And real quick, has any disciplinary action of any kind been taken at this point?
Again, because there's an ongoing investigation and that talks about personnel things, really not ready to answer anything like that at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have Bill Poehler with the Statesman Journal.
Yeah, hi. The question is for Gail. When we're looking at the numbers for September, the employment numbers, what are we seeing there as far as what do you is there any trends that we can take as far as with the federal benefits ending at the beginning of September that we can see month over month from like August to September?
Gail, you're on mute.
19 months into a pandemic, and I still just did that. I'm sorry. What I was saying is, with the end of the pandemic, the federal pandemic benefits, that was a one-time event that happened to about 81,000 Oregonians. And what we've seen nationally is a couple of things. First, we saw that there was not an incredible rush back to a job when half of the states ended those programs early. So there were about a little more than half of states ended the pandemic federal benefits in June and July. And by early August, only about 1 out of 8 of those workers had returned to a job. And in Oregon and nationwide, we don't really have Oregon specific data just yet, but, or I'm not sure how we will in the coming months after we track them on payrolls, but that takes, a good 6 months. But what we've seen nationwide is that there was not a significant change in job seeking activity among the jobless. That again is information from the Indeed hiring lab. And so they looked at, what's the primary reason that you're not, that you are not having this sense of urgency to get right back into a job. And this speaks to what I was talking about with Peter Wong. And again, what the Office of Economic Analysis was talking about, is that about a third of them said it was because they had a financial cushion. And there was also about 30% said that because they had a spouse that was working. And again, I think that this non-rush, like not seeing this massive rush back to payroll employers has something to do with that very broad financial cushion that we saw throughout 2020 and 2021, which again brightens our economic outlook, but also speaks to the other things that are going on in people's lives. The fear of COVID, the concern about getting it or spreading it, or being more directly in contact with it on a regular basis, depending upon the work environment. I think that all of those are factors that are playing in people's decisions.
Okay, so that kind of follows with what I was thinking. I'm wondering if, and I know some private employers already put in the vaccine mandates. Are we seeing anything in the numbers from the September numbers that you've seen of where vaccine mandates private employers has impacted anything on the jobs numbers?
So we reported the jobs numbers for September yesterday, and the vaccine guidelines that are going into place have started this week and are going in through, I believe, the end of November. So I don't believe the September numbers reflect any changes that are, due to vaccine mandates. We do estimate that between the state and federal vaccine guidelines, that about 1.1 million jobs in Oregon fall underneath those guidelines. So that's about 3 out of every 5 jobs in Oregon. In terms of what will happen, we're in really uncharted territory. So we're all waiting to see what happens. We've seen certain situations, where you see that there are workforce departures or separations, and then other, situations where employers have reported that they implemented their own vaccine mandates and saw an increase in applications for their jobs. So I think it's just really uncharted territory, and we're all going to be looking forward to seeing what happens as the situation continues to change.
Okay, thanks, Gail.
Now we have Kate Davidson with OPB.
Hi, thanks. David, this is for you. Can you name the outside attorney who's investigating the discrimination complaint, and also say whether any other agencies are involved, like Foley?
We can follow up on whether we can share the name afterwards. I'm not aware that any other agencies are involved at this point.
Okay. And then you mentioned concerns, not just about the culture of OED and the paid family medical leave. I don't know if you would say team or department, but you also mentioned concerns about equity within the program itself. Can you just sort of flesh out what you mean by having concerns about equity within the program?
Sure. And to clarify, I was emphasizing that that's something that is vital to the program, and it's something that we want to make sure is there. And when we hear concerns about internal dynamics, we want to make sure that that isn't manifesting in how the program is being built. And what we're really shooting for from the beginning, the paid family medical leave insurance program is a rare opportunity to really build a new essential program to help workers and businesses, and to from the start take advantage of learning and approaches now that simply weren't being looked at, decades and generations ago when other government programs were made. We know that some programs have either eligibility issues or the ways that people access programs or how they're structured themselves that create barriers for underserved or historically discriminated against groups. And it's vital to us, and has been core for us from the beginning, to make sure that as we build the paid family medical leave insurance program, we don't do that we go out of our way to make it as accessible as possible. I think the legislative history of the program itself shows that that was the intent, to be very broad and inclusive. And that means looking also at a lot of the lessons that we learned during the pandemic about, for instance, the PUA and unemployment programs, and really focusing on making things as accessible as possible to everyone. So when we're having outside experts come in, we do want to take advantage of that expertise and have them look at how we're doing that. We're using an equity framework for our rulemaking for the system, the paid family medical leave insurance program as we're building it. So this is at the forefront of our mind, but we want those outside experts reviewing that and guiding us and giving us any additional feedback or insights that they can, so that we can make sure that we launch this program so that it really is very inclusive to everyone.
And I'm so sorry to squeeze in 2.5, but you were saying that you don't expect delays to the implementation of the program resulting from the investigation or the staffing challenges?
That's correct. We're still on track. I think I've shared before, there's still a whole lot of work to do, but the team is making really good progress. It's actively under development. The rules are being made. The program is being designed. And at this point, we still believe that we're on track for those statutory timelines.
Thank you.
Now we have Tom Cusack with Oregon Housing Blog. Tom, are you on the call?
Hi,
Remember
can you hear me?
Oh, there he is.
Sorry about that. I have a question about housing tenure and unemployment insurance. I looked at the most recent census pulse survey for Oregon, and it showed that about 119,000 households indicated they had used unemployment insurance to pay bills within the last week or so. And when I looked carefully at the numbers, it looked to me like the breakout between renters and homeowners was something like 44% for renters and about 56% for homeowners. And I'm wondering whether that jives with what information you might have about the use of unemployment insurance by renters, and secondly, whether there's a better source of information than that Census Pulse survey.
I'll make an attempt on this one. I want to make sure I've got the time frame correct. So the most recent Census Pulse survey data that I've looked at, which is what I was talking about with the people who were, either not working because they were afraid of getting COVID or because they had it. That time frame was from September 15th to September 27th. Is that the same time frame that you're referencing, or was that something more recent?
Yeah, I think the table, and I don't have the information right in front of me, I believe it was like tables 2A and 2B in Census Pulse survey. I believe it was 39 is the one I was looking at.
Okay, so it might be 2 weeks a little more current. I don't have any other source of information that is more current or tuned into this than the Census Pulse survey. They started this survey about 2 months into the pandemic, and it's really been a wonderful addition to the amount of information that we are able to get, especially in its currency, because census data usually comes out once a year. So I don't have anything more current or more specific than what you've already got there.
And so a follow-up question, Gail, would be whether there's any reason to think there would be any significant change in those ratios based on the changing nature of who's receiving unemployment insurance in terms of the hospitality industry and things like that. Any reason that you could think of that number should have changed in any significant way?
It's something I haven't studied in detail or really at the high level yet. It seems to me that we would see, as fewer people are receiving unemployment insurance benefits, that particularly in the coming weeks, that would be a non-existent source of paying for bills. And so it seems like that would change. And I don't really know how it could change across renting versus owning. I think, if anything, the relationship to potentially investigate there would be between household income and propensity to either own or rent, because we do know that throughout the pandemic recession, lower wage earners were more likely to be affected throughout.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next is Angelina Dixon with KVAL, and she's having some mic issues, so I'm going to ask her questions of Gail myself. So she says, you may have mentioned this, but what are the particular job sectors that are struggling right now?
In terms of adding back jobs, I mentioned, for example, private education only having recovered 1 out of 5 jobs that it lost last spring, but that's relatively small. Leisure and hospitality has been hiring at a good pace, but still has that large deficit back to a full jobs recovery. So in terms of adding back jobs, those are the ones that I mentioned. In terms of hiring, I would argue all sectors. When we're seeing 4 out of 5 jobs being difficult to fill across the economy, that is indicative of widespread challenges in terms of hiring.
Okay, and the follow-up question is, what can we expect for jobs for the holidays?
Well, we do. So I mentioned earlier that we are likely to see an increase in transportation, warehousing, and utilities. That includes freight, companies carrying freight, and then also packages that get delivered to our doors, and the storage and the warehousing locations along the way. And we really do tend to see that it's been a more seasonal industry over the years, particularly when we're seeing package deliveries tending to hit their highest volumes in December. So that's something that I think we can anticipate seeing more hiring in. We also tend to see a seasonal run-up in retail trade hiring. I mentioned also that retail trade had a record number of job vacancies in the summer. And even though retail might look a little bit different in some ways, where maybe they're adding some jobs for people who package up the things that get picked up curbside or something instead, we've seen that there has been pretty consistent demand, even though it might be in a little bit different nature than it was before the pandemic in retail too.
Okay, and now we go to Dylan Robichaud with KEZI, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. If you're struggling to get off mute, remember to hit *6.
Can you hear me now?
Is that Dylan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is, how would you characterize the state of the unemployment right now in Oregon? Would you consider it mostly frictional unemployment?
That's a good question. So for context, there are kind of two big categories of unemployment. There's frictional unemployment, so that kind of time between one job and another, that, searching time. And then there's structural unemployment, where there are mismatches between the jobs that are available and the workers that are out there looking for them. So in terms of frictional unemployment, I am assuming that you're talking about that increase that I was talking about in people who voluntarily quit their jobs and are without another one lined up and are looking for it. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. So in terms of that, we're seeing, like I said, this increase in quits, and that transfer between jobs. If you didn't already have another one lined up, then there is some friction or some time in between those two, and we are seeing those quits happening at record rates nationwide. And I think it really speaks to the nature of the labor market. I mentioned there are not enough available workers for this record number of job openings that are out there, and I think that is contributing to workers' ability to choose to move to another job if they'd like to.
Thank you.